friends, thanks for joining me today. I've decided to try doing more monthly wrap-ups rather than single book reviews for a little while. I've found that in recent months I've skipped filming videos for half the books that I'm reading because I don't have the gumption to make dedicated videos for each of them, but I've been reading a lot recently, so let me just go ahead and get started going over everything that I read this month. I finished The Raven Cycle. I have literally not even mentioned the first 3 books at all on my channel because of the reasoning that I just said, so you can see what I mean, case in point. This is the 4th and final book in the series, The Raven King by Maggie Stiefvater, and it was great. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and the series focuses on a girl named Blue who comes from a family of psychics, and it also follows the 4 boys that she becomes friends with, the Raven Boys, and they are on this quest to find an ancient Welsh king who will supposedly grant a wish to the person who wakes him from his enchanted slumber. And it's a pretty character-driven story, I would say, very beautifully written. The author does an amazing job showing, not telling, and really just evokes the emotions of the characters by writing around feelings, like in such an incredible way. It's kind of hard to describe, and her style almost reminds me somewhat of Neal Gaiman's writing style. There's this blunt shortness to it, but the characters are still complex, and it takes place in a town called Henrietta in Virginia that's full of magic and secrets. There's tarot readings, reading energy and scrying, a magical forest, and it is just all so up my alley for taking place, in the real world. It's so magical, and at times it gave me like the chills. The whole series is so good, and the last book had a satisfying ending, but the author does bring in like one super background character from previous books and brings him in as a much bigger side character in this last book, which just felt a little random to me. I didn't connect with him or care about him basically at all like I do most other characters, but overall I really enjoyed this. And here's another book from a series that I haven't mentioned at all on my channel but have been reading for a while. So I finished the 4th book in the Throne of Glass series, which is Queen of Shadows by Sarah J. Maas. I write a review for everything that I read on Goodreads regardless of if I make a video on it, so please check out those reviews if you want to see what I thought about the first 3 books, I guess both for this and The Raven Cycle. So this series follows a young and beautiful assassin named Sarena in a conquered country that used to have magic but doesn't anymore because of this tyrant king, and he did something to basically get rid of the magic in the continent. And book 1 is all about a competition where Sarena is fighting others to become the king's champion and earn her freedom, and things evolve and become more complex from there. So I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed it, though not quite as much as book 3. I thought that book 3 was great, really good. The ending of this was really crazy though, really intense. A lot of stuff gets resolved in this book, and it's sort of leading into the next phase of what's going to happen next in the series. And the cast of characters gets even larger, and I really like the people that are introduced. And my all-time favorite character though so far is Manon Blackbeak, by far, the Iron Teeth Witch. She is so badass, I can't even. So there are lots of strong women in this series. There are a few character relationship dynamics in this book that didn't really feel right to me based on how the characters had been portrayed in previous books, so I didn't love that about this one. The writing is, it's very YA, still very angsty, lots of just descriptions of, longing and emotional suffering or wanting to punch someone in the face for one reason or another. So if you, love that kind of, YA drama, you'll probably enjoy this series. I'm invested at this point and definitely want to continue with the next book. I read The Ones We're Meant to Find by Joan. This came in an OwlCrate box, and the cover is perfect, so beautiful. This is a dystopian sci-fi about two sisters, C and Casey, and C has been trapped on an island all alone for 3 years with no memory of how she got there. All she knows is that she has to escape and find her sister. And then there's Casey, who is super smart and lives in this floating eco-city and is trying to discover what happened to her sister, who went missing and is presumed dead. So I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. The writing is beautiful. It's split into first-person narration for C's chapters and third-person for Casey's chapters. The main thing about this book, though, is that it was a real downer. It was kind of depressing. Aside from the missing sister plot, this is all about climate change and how humans wreck the planet and about how selfish we are. It's very relevant. It's not a hopeful book. So if you're looking, for something that's kind of sad and thought-provoking and depressing a little bit, then this will be a good one for you. If you're looking to be inspired or for anything really remotely resembling a feel-good story, this is not it. There are some cool twists. I like the idea behind this. I just personally didn't have a good time reading it. Casey is a really unique heroine compared to a lot that I've read about, because she's pretty clearly on the spectrum, neurodivergent maybe, and she has a very detached view on life and humanity. And on one hand, it was refreshing and different, but on the other hand, I didn't really like her that much because of how cold she was. She was kind of hard to relate to. In some ways, she was easy to relate to, but in other ways, very much not. I appreciate this book. It's different from a lot of books I've read, and lays bare some worrying observations about humanity with no real positive messaging to soften it. So a respectful 3 out of 5 stars. I finished an audiobook called Superpowered Year 1 by Drew Hayes. You're following 5 college-age kids who are part of the HCP, the Hero Certification Program, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's for people with special abilities called supers to train and become bona fide heroes in society. And there are also people called powards, who are people who have abilities but they can't control them, and they're basically, discriminated against, considered liabilities and second-class citizens. And the 5 main characters used to be powards, but through this experimental procedure, they gain the control that makes them supers. And the book is about their freshman year experience at college, keeping this fact a secret while participating in this grueling training program. And I gave this a kind of apathetic 3 out of 5. It was okay. The narrator was really annoying to listen to. He has this weird affect to his voice that I can't tell if it's faked or what, but it almost makes it hard to take seriously. And this was originally published as a web novel, released a few chapters at a time over time online, and I think because of that, the pacing is drawn out and weird, and this is almost completely slice of life, which I don't really like. Even though it involves people with superpowers, it doesn't go anywhere in particular. You're just following these students with abilities around their school year, and there are some cool fight scenes for sure, and the very end sequence was also cool, but most of this was just exposition with nothing overarching to drive the story at all. So if you like budding superhero stories and slice of life, then you might enjoy this, but because there was just no plot really, Like, this became a slog for me. It was a 26-hour audiobook, so really long for me. The books that I've read have not been nearly that long, and even the twist conflict at the end wasn't enough to make me particularly want to continue this series. So yeah, just kind of a meh 3 out of 5. I read book 2 of the Illuminae files called Gemina by Amy Kaufman and Kristoff. This is a mixed media sci-fi, and you're following 2 kids in this book, Hannah and Nick, on board a jump station called Heimdall. And this station surrounds a wormhole connecting to, 2 extremely distant places in the universe for travel. And this takes place at the same time as some of the events in book 1, Illuminae, and in Illuminae there is a ship of refugees who are trying to get to Heimdall after a powerful corporation attacks their mining planet, and they're being chased by that corporation, which is trying to eliminate all eyewitnesses to the attack and just kill anyone who knows anything about it. So it's all connected to the same plot, just focusing on a different place and cast with a different mission. And this had everything that I loved about Illuminae, but I actually liked the 2 main characters, so I wasn't the biggest fan of the 2 main characters in book 1. I really had to warm up to them, but right off the bat, I loved Nick and Hannah. I liked their banter and their personalities. I love the stunning visuals and layouts. Like, this book is like, it's just so, it's same with Illuminae, it's just so interesting and interactive, and it was like watching a movie, in my mind, just very cinematic. There were, several twists that I enjoyed, and I'm just really excited to see how this culminates in book 3. Then I read another book I got from OwlCrate, and it was Sisters of the Snake by Sarena and Sasha Nanua. This is an Indian-inspired YA fantasy about twin sisters named Ria and Rani. Ria grew up thieving in the streets, while Rani grew up as a princess in a palace, and neither of them knew that they had a sister, and they meet one day when Ria sneaks into the palace to steal jewels to help her escape conscription for this impending war, but she runs into Rani before she could get out, and they decide to switch places so Ria can learn the truth about her birth, and Rani can seek out this mysterious artifact that her tutor secretly wanted her to find before he was executed. And I feel kind of bad about this one because I wanted to say that I really enjoy it. The authors are twin sisters themselves. They're young authors, and it's great to have more diverse voices in YA fantasy, but I ended up giving this 2 out of 5 stars. So for one, there's no way that a street urchin and a princess would have similar enough skin texture and body weight to be able to fool anyone if they switch places. So like, this whole premise asks you to just ignore that, which is kind of silly, but so aside from that, the sisters aren't very distinct characters the way that they're written. Even though they're meant to be very different people, it was still sometimes kind of hard to remember who was who. And there's potential in the magic system, so there's your typical elemental magic, as well as 2 kind of cool different kinds of magic, snake magic and memory magic, and they both sound really cool and unique, but they were both in this book very underutilized. There was a sad lack of using actual snakes, which is a thing that can be done in this world. People with snake magic can kind of communicate with snakes and have them do their bidding, but it just wasn't really utilized in this book. And actually the elemental magic isn't even really used either, because the state of the world is that those magics basically faded over time, and basically all but snake magic has seemingly disappeared, and only royalty has snake magic. The writing was a little too simplistic, even for me, and I'm the girl who prefers simple prose over lyrical prose. And there were just quite a few plot holes. I didn't really feel anything for the romances that happened. The plot was fine, I enjoyed the references to Indian culture, like the food and the clothing descriptions, but like it didn't take long for me to just like want to get the book finished, and I wasn't reading because I was particularly enjoying it. I don't like DNFing books, so I wanted to get through this. But by my criteria, it's not a very good book, but it's probably suitable for young teenage readers who are less concerned with, plot consistency and great writing, and who just want a sister swap fantasy with some magic and romance thrown in. So I feel bad about not being able to give this at least like an average 3 out of 5, but I found myself wanting to just be done with it, not even halfway through. And I know there is a sequel. I can't remember what the sequel's called, but I think it's coming out this year. I'm probably not going to pick it up, but if this sounds interesting to you, I think it's at least a duology. I think there's 2 books. Then I read Turning Darkness into Light by Marie Brennan. This is a companion novel to her series A Natural History of Dragons, which I love. The very first review I ever did on my channel was for the first book in that series. I'll leave some links below and on the video if you're interested. You could read this as a standalone, I guess. I've seen reviews where people started with this book, but it won't be as meaningful an experience without the background of the rest of the series, and honestly it's kind of a spoiler for the series, so I'd recommend just reading book 1 if you're interested in this. So you're following Audrey, the granddaughter of the main character of the main series, who is working to translate these ancient clay tablets from an ancient civilization, and her work leads her deep into this academic conspiracy that's meant to incite violence and prejudice, and she has to figure out, what's going on before it's too late, uncover the conspiracy. And I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. I loved the main series, and it was fun going back to, the Victorian style setting and prose, but I wasn't as invested in the characters as I was over the course of 5 books of the main series, and a big chunk of the middle of this felt like it was just kind of dragging on and not much was happening. Like they're translating an ancient language, and the translation provides a lot of the tension, like what they find out after they translate, and it was cool and interesting, but people sitting in a room translating text can only be so dramatic. And but the book has some great themes around the power of the stories that we tell, and about cultural shifts and changes. And it's also actually an epistolary novel. So it's written via diary entries, newspaper articles, and some other media, which I enjoy. I really like that sort of epistolary style. I just wasn't enamored with this the way that I was with the main series. So 3 out of 5. And finally, I finished the audiobook for Dry by Neal Shusterman and Jarrod Shusterman. And this takes place in Southern California during a drought over the course of about a week. And it starts, with the moment that the taps stop running and there is no more water. And you're following a handful of characters focused mainly on a girl named Alyssa and her younger brother Garrett, as their community starts to fall apart and they have to try and find water and survive against other desperate people who will do anything, to ensure their own survival. And this was like very disturbing and scary because it could totally happen with the insanity of climate change and the absolute state of our planet. So if thinking about that stuff makes you very anxious, I would say think carefully before reading this, because it will make you anxious. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It was really good and really horrifying. The characters are very distinct, and their personalities and their backgrounds make for an interesting dynamic as, they meet each other and have to work together to survive. It's high stakes, life and death, and a bit of a wake-up call for readers, especially those who haven't experienced anything like this firsthand. The only thing I would maybe complain about, and it isn't really even like a real complaint, it's just my own taste, but Alyssa herself was annoying at times because she is a very selfless and noble person who's always trying to, do the right thing, which would often put her in danger. And as the reader, you know that what she's about to do is stupid and not in her best interest, but she does it anyway because that's just the kind of person that she is. But that's just part of her character, so that's just my personal preference talking. It was a great book. Highly recommend if you can stomach the premise. And that's it. So these are all the books that I read this month. Quite a fat stack for me, including 2 audiobooks. I've been having a great time reading a lot lately, and I like that by doing wrap-ups like this, I can actually talk about everything I've read rather than feel overwhelmed with wanting to film a separate review for every book. Like, I would have had to film 8 videos this month otherwise, and I don't have the time or patience for that at the moment, so a wrap-up is perfect. And it's not like I'm never going to film single book reviews ever again, but this has just been really nice and kind of taken some stress off. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!